Hello everyone, my name is Dezzy, and I have spent the last 100 hours of my life surviving the wastelands of Kenshi. What is Kenshi? Kenshi is an open-world sandbox survival game where you are a pathetic nobody, trying to not get your teeth kicked in by the residents of the post-apocalypse. It's a hardcore survival game where you will be struggling day by day just to eat enough to live and not get ripped apart by the local bandit population. But this video isn't following that aspect of the game. As I've spent the last week of my sad life grinding away the boring survival shit, and I have finally made a fully functioning base with an elite squad of fighters. Welcome everyone to New Sun, my little sanctuary, and meet the Sun Squad, my elite group of warriors who pulled a Warhammer 40k AdMech and ripped off their old fleshy limbs to be replaced with cybernetics. There's Rayuni, Black Sheep, Ruka, Hamut, Skins, and of course, Beep.
Hello, it appears Dezzy forgot to mention me. Sad Neil, it's okay though, because I hate myself. I am the last member of the Sun Squad, but you don't need to remember me because Dezzy doesn't either.
And there's the workers, but we don't need to go into all of them because they aren't the main characters of this little Kenshi story. No. In this story, we will be following the Sun Squad and their mission to overthrow the Holy Nation. The Holy Nation are a highly religious empire of zealots who worship Okran, the Lord of Light, and hate Narco, the Demoness of Darkness. But I'm not going to get into all that fancy Kenshi lore, you can go watch a video for that. All I'm going to do is just read you this one quote from one of the Holy Nation books, and you'll understand why we don't like these guys. Man was created in the human image of Okran, Lord of Light. Woman was created in the image of Narco, Demoness of Darkness. Seek caution, children of Okran. An impure race is an unholy one. They must be rebirthed to serve the cause of Okran, lest they join the cause of darkness. An unrestrained woman is an idle one. She must be subdued, lest she seduce and tempt the purity of man into the darkness with her. That's right, the Holy Nation are led by a bunch of incel men. There's also a bunch of other reasons why we don't like these guys, but just know we're going to defeat them. Now, originally I was going to do a whole Kenshi series where I went from rock bottom all the way to where we are now, but that's boring. I want to show off the fun stuff. And the fun stuff is going to be the Sun Squad destroying the Holy Nation. So, let's start telling the story. Now, a little bit of setup before we get into the nitty-gritty of it all. This is Holy Nation territory, and the Holy Nation hold onto three major cities. There is Stack, Bad Teeth, and Ballister Hill. They also have tons and tons of Holy Nation military bases and outposts and Okran Shield and all that kind of stuff. But these are the main major settlements that we need to take from the Holy Nation. The Holy Nation is led by three individuals. The Lord Phoenix, blessed be his name, is the main primary dude that we are after. He is one of the strongest enemies in the game, and he's going to be the last thing that we fight. Underneath the Holy Phoenix, blessed be his name, are two High Inquisitors. High Inquisitor Seta, who rules over Stack, and High Inquisitor Valtana, who watches over Okran Shield. All three of these individuals must be destroyed, killed, captured, fed to beak things, and once that is done, the Holy Nation will fall. Although, not exactly because I have Reactive World on, and in Reactive World there's a couple other steps to defeating the Holy Nation, but if we take out these three main boys, they will be severely crippled, and then it'll basically just be wiping up the scraps of their empire. Also, we have some allies in the story. The Shek Kingdom is another one of the major empires in Kenshi. They are comprised wholly of the race known as Shek. The Shek are tall, strong humanoids. They have these long horns that grow from their heads, and they have a very intense war, fighting, and honor culture. They're basically the Githyanki from Dungeons & Dragons. If you've played Baldur's Gate and you know who Lae'zel is, the Shek, it's basically just an empire of Lae'zels. However, even though the Shek are all about war and fighting, they are, in my opinion, much morally better than the Holy Nation, so I went ahead and allied myself with them by defeating a man called the Bugmaster. I don't have any footage of me beating the Bugmaster. He's one of the hardest enemies in all of Kenshi, and now my character Sad Neil has his sword, which is pretty cool. But just know that I used an insane amount of cheese to beat him, and it was definitely just Ryuni running around in a circle with a crossbow, shooting the Bugmaster until he died because I couldn't beat him in melee combat and I tried like 10 times. Okay, enough with all that bullcrap. Let's get into the actual story. So we have our first goal, which is Stack, the first city, where we have to defeat High Inquisitor Seta. Seta? Seta? Seta. Seta. I'm going to call him Seta. However, this wouldn't be any simple affair. This isn't exactly a bandit camp that we're rolling into. This is a highly fortified military city with tons and tons of paladins, inquisitors, high paladins, and of course the big man High Inquisitor Seta himself. So we were going to need a lot more men, as while the Sun Squad were pretty competent fighters, there was no way in hell this small little group of ragtag bruisers was going to beat an entire military force of paladins. So I needed an army. And to get an army, we needed funds. So I sent out Black Sheep and Ryuni on money runs. Their entire goal was to just scour the remains of the old empire, basically taking any shiny mechanical bits and selling them off to the tech hunters for tons and tons of cats. I wanted about $600,000 to fund this military effort I was planning. And so my two little hive boys went out into the world and raided every single piece of valuable they could find. They went to town, selling off their goods until finally we had a nice little chunk of extra cash to fund this whole military plan that I had. My favorite little adventure is when Ryuni, the stealth master sneak 100 god that he is, went into the base of the Reaver faction and just stole a bunch of shit right under their noses. I was even thinking about trying to knock out their leader, but I decided to hold off for the time being. We got into a couple fights, we raided a bunch of old empire buildings, and we had a lot of money. So, to take over Stack, I wanted a full military army. Now, there is a very popular mod for Kenshi, which increases the recruitment limit to 257, I believe. But I did not have this mod installed, mainly because I think it's a little broken, because once you start getting that many recruits, you can kind of just run over any faction in the game. Also, I didn't know if my computer would explode with that many people on screen. So I was working with the standard 30-person recruitment limit. So once the hivers got back into my outpost, I went ahead and sent out Ryuni on a person run. We went from city to city, way station to way station, finding any drifter that would join us, paying them a good amount of money and then taking them back to base. Also back at base, I set up a full-on training ring with training dummies, weightlifting benches, dexterity training dummies, the whole nine. And we had all of our new recruits get to work training their base stats for combat. But I knew that these training dummies weren't going to be perfect for getting these soldiers ready for combat. They needed a little bit more physical experience. So I did a very common tactic in Kenshi, which is to find a prisoner, preferably a skeleton, lock them up in a cage, and then have all the trainees come into a room, release the skeleton, and have it beat the shit out of all of the recruits. This would train their recruits melee defense, melee attack, toughness, dexterity, all that good stuff that you would need for actual combat. And we would do it in a controlled environment, so if the recruit got knocked out, which they usually did, we usually had a bunch of backup Sun Squad members to actually take out the robot and throw it back into its prison cell. We also used the robot to train up some of the Sun Squad, as they were pretty decent fighters, but they always had more room for improvement. And we kept training and training and training, a lot of the same old routine of healing up the robot, letting the robot out, letting the robot beat up a bunch of people, and then putting it back in the cage, rinse and repeat as we kept building up our skills. While this was all happening, I had Twitch, our weaponsmith, go ahead and craft a bunch of new weapons for the recruits to use. I thought about it long and hard which weapon I wanted the entire army to use, and I decided on hackers, particularly the flesh cleavers. The reason I picked the flesh cleavers is because they had armor penetration, and they also dealt bonus damage against humans. Now, again, I kind of regretted my decision to use hackers. I think it would have been better to give them heavy pole arms, but I was already like halfway through making all of these flesh hackers, flesh cleavers by the time I realized this, and they weren't bad weapons by any stretch of the imagination. It was mainly that damage bonus to humans that really caught my eye, since, the Holy Nation is only made up of humans, so I thought it was a pretty good pick. But the multitasking wasn't done, not by a long shot. While the recruits were training, while Twitch was making weapons, I sent Beep and Rayuni out on another mission. And this mission was to get armor. Now, I could have had Kat, who is our armor smith, make a bunch of fresh armor for the recruits, but if I was being completely honest, I wasn't expecting these soldiers to survive this fight, and I didn't want to waste a bunch of my resources making specialist armor for everyone. So instead, I went ahead and sent out 2 more hivers out into the United Cities, where we went to the local armor shops and borrowed what wouldn't be missed. Rayuni went into shop after shop, taking all the nice armor pieces that were at least standard quality or better, loading it into Beep's backpack until we were full of borrowed equipment. After that, we ran all the way back to base, and at this point, the training was going pretty well. I wanted everyone to at least be around 30 in melee attack and melee defense. I also went ahead and downloaded a mod that gave me weight training benches to increase strength and dexterity training dummies to increase dexterity. The main reason for this is because it saves a lot of time, and I find strength training incredibly boring. And so I just went ahead and downloaded a mod that lets you train strength up. And it's not like strength really affects combat that much. It just affects how much you can carry and, what armor and weapons you can use, which I think is perfectly balanced and not broken at all. After many hours of just grinding the same routine, making weapons, stealing armor, training the recruits, we finally had an army of 15 individuals and the new Sun Squad. I was also bringing out one of our workers named Stone. Stone is usually on the harpoon turrets. He's one of our gunners, but he has really good crossbows. And I realized that he was the only ranged character I had in my entire faction. Everyone else was melee. Now, usually in Kenshi you want a nice mix of ranged attackers and melee attackers, but you see, I'm not a pussy, and I like to fight everything in glorious melee combat, like the true world eater that I am. So, I only had 1 crossbowman, but I figured that it would be good to have at least 1 ranged specialist, so I decided to bring Stone along as well for this endeavor. I went ahead and gave all the new recruits their brand new weaponry, gave them all of their borrowed armor, and they were fully kitted out and ready for battle. The Sun Squad was also fully ready to go. They had fresh cybernetics, the best armor, the best weapons, and the best training. We were ready to take down Stack and put High Inquisitor Seta's head on a pike. The strongest member of the new Sun Army was a Shek named Kong, or Kang. I'm really bad at pronouncing names in this fucking game, so I'm gonna call him Kang. Kang was the strongest member, so we gave him the best armor and the best weaponry, as he would be basically the leader of the new Sun Army, leading the charge behind the Sun Squad. It was ready. All of these hours of grinding, stealing from the rich, training, using this poor police bot as a beat stick. Also, by the way, it was off camera, but this police bot actually died because I forgot to repair him after a training session, and he just bled out in his cage. Yeah, so rest in peace, police bot. Thank you for your service in training up my army and getting beaten relentlessly multiple times and then dying because no one repaired you. As we stood at the gates of my grand city, which isn't actually that grand at all. In fact, the space is pretty fucking ugly and poorly laid out. But in my eyes, in this very moment, it was a beautiful city as I looked at the Sun Squad. Rayuni, Black Sheep, Ruka, Hamut, Sad Neil, Skins, and Beep. These would be the great leaders that led us to victory against the Holy Nation. Let's get going. I've spent too long on this speech. Well, first, I decided to take out the new Sun Army for a little bit of a spin. I just wanted to see how fun it is to have this many soldiers on screen at once. So we went into the desert, found some dust bandits, and beat the shit out of them. let me tell you, having a full military force is pretty damn awesome, and just watching a bunch of your fully kitted out guys murder bandits was really, really fun. I did this for a little bit, just because, you know, I wanted to get some amount of enjoyment out of my military that I spent so long crafting. Just look at them go. Look at those poor little dust bandits. Oh, yep, they didn't survive. After I was done bullying the local bandits, we went ahead and actually started to march for the city of Stack. And it was a pretty smooth journey. No one came and fought us except for some more dust bandits, but they got eviscerated. We finally made it to the hub, where we stopped and resupplied on food and medical equipment and just, you know, hyped ourselves up for this big old battle. I also went ahead and hired myself some mercenaries, just because you couldn't have too many bodies now, could you? I also wanted to go ahead and try and get some Sheks, since we were allied with them. If I found any patrols of Sheks, I could ask them to follow us, and that could have been even more men. But I just couldn't find any Shek patrols, and I was already really antsy about this fight, so I didn't decide to go and try and hunt down a Shek patrol, as we already had more than enough men for this battle. There it was, the Holy Nation City. I went ahead and split our forces into two smaller groups, Assault Force 1 and Assault Force 2. Since the city of Stack has two separate gates, my plan was to split up the military force and basically sandwich the paladins into the center of the city. So I went ahead and split up my forces, and we waited until the fall of night. Once night rolled in, I had Rayuni walk up to the Holy Sentinels and start beating their heads in and unequipping them. This is a common tactic in Kenshi called disarming, where you knock out someone and then you throw all their weapons on the ground. Because for some reason the enemies in Kenshi don't pick their gear back up, so if you knock someone out and then throw their sword on the ground, they just won't have a sword anymore. It's a pretty good tactic, and I was planning on using it a little bit for this fight, just to make it a little bit easier. But I could have gone to every single paladin and unequipped them, but that was boring and not fun, so I went ahead and sent the forces in as we charged the city. It was a glorious sight. All of my men charging into the gates of Stack, the Holy Paladins running out of the barracks to try and counter us. The battle was bloody. Immediately, my men and the Paladins began to fall. Even with all my training, these were also highly trained military soldiers, and they were kicking our teeth in a little bit. But my soldiers were holding fast, and the Sun Squad were going to absolute town, especially Ruka and Hamut. Ruka and Hamut were both my frontline tanks with falling suns. They were absolute monsters in close combat. And they had masterwork lifter arms, which means they had insane levels of strength, meaning they could swing around their falling suns like toothpicks. Sad Neil was a defensive monster because he had the foreign saber, the weapon of the bug master himself, and Sad Neil just wasn't getting hit. He was basically my off tank, as he was just blocking incoming attack after incoming attack. Black Sheep and Rayuni were spinning around their fucking katanas like Beyblades, and they were slicing people's necks open. Skins was just chopping people to bits with her giant moon cleaver. And Beep was just beeping. He was going crazy. He was Beep. He was a monster. I'm now going to shut up and just give you some cool cinematic shots of the battle, because this was some of the most fun I've ever had in Kenshi. I think I've had about 150 hours in this game, and let me tell you, nothing has given me a rush like taking on an actual city. So let's just enjoy the beautiful masterpiece of this bloodshed. This battle was long and drawn out. There were so many soldiers, more soldiers than I thought, and I was starting to lose men as people were starting to go unconscious. No one had died yet, but a lot of our soldiers were in recovery comas or they were unconscious for a very long period of time. Also, a nearby Holy Nation patrol spotted our siege and they sent in extra reinforcements, which means we had to fight a whole new group of paladins running into the city to reinforce. At this point, we were winning, but only slightly. Yes, we were taking out holy paladins. Yes, we were disarming them of their great weapons. But there was just a lot, and we hadn't even touched the throne room yet. High Inquisitor Seda and his Inquisitor bodyguards were still in there waiting for us. And while we were slaughtering the paladins outside, I was worried, because we had lost about half of our force at this point, and I was kind of scared that we wouldn't have enough manpower to defeat the High Inquisitor. So I sent in Rayuni, in an effort to try and knock out the High Inquisitor, as at this point I was willing to use a little bit of stealth cheese to try and actually win this fight. However, Rayuni choked and couldn't knock out one of the Inquisitors, and Seta and the Inquisitor chased us outside into the fray of battle. It was at this point I had my soldiers charge the High Inquisitor as we fought him in the middle of the streets. Almost all members of the Sun Squad were fighting Seta, as I had the rest of my troops running around and keeping the enemy paladins down and in the dirt. Even though Seta was just one man, he was a powerful man, swinging around his paladin's cross like it was nothing. He was hacking, slashing, bashing, and I was worried that we were probably going to lose this fight and we would have to run away and heal our wounds. But then, it happened. That is right. Our legendary Hiver Beep bopped Seta on the head with his heavy polearm, and Seta crumbled like a Jenga tower. After that, I ran over and quickly looted the High Inquisitor's body and took all of his armor and his weapons, and we went ahead and threw him over our shoulder. And that was it. The battle was won. Seta was now ours, and Stack had fallen to new sun. And now there were still paladins in the area, getting up and healing themselves, so instead of sticking around to keep on fighting these paladins that just wouldn't stay down, we just left. We had what we came for, the High Inquisitor, and we went all the way back to the Shek Kingdom. We went up to the Stone Golem herself, and we turned in the High Inquisitor. With that, our title as the Battleborn was reinforced as the Shek celebrated the fall of this High Inquisitor. Now, the Holy Lord Phoenix, fuck his name, had lost one of his High Inquisitors. And Stack fell under control of the Shek Empire. The Holy Nation had lost a major city, and our allies now ruled a significant portion of Okrin's land. This was a great victory. However, I realized that having a 15-person military squad along with the new Sun squad was a lot of people, and it costed a lot of food and a lot of supplies and a lot of micro. So after a lot of thinking, I went ahead and downgraded. Now, in my role-playing mind, I just sent away those that I thought weren't in it to continue the fight against the Holy Nation. But in actual game terms, I just, disbanded a bunch of people because this was way, way too many people to consistently be micromanaging all the time. So I just went ahead and fired a bunch of people. And before you ask, yes, I did strip them of all their gear and sold it at the local shop, which means they all left naked, but, they got a lot of training experience, they got some cats, they'll be fine. There is also another thing that happened, which is a major bug. So whenever you take out a major player from an empire, they will usually send a giant retaliation force to try and, defeat you. And in the Holy Nation's case, it's this event called the Wrath of God. The Wrath of God is usually led by High Inquisitor Seta. However, Seta was imprisoned by the Sheks. And sometimes the game bugs out and will spawn the retaliation force on top of Seta, which means all the paladins spawned inside the Shek city. In my role-playing head, I just said that, the Holy Paladins were trying to save their High Inquisitor, but in actual game terms, it was a bug. In efforts to make sure this bug didn't happen again, I went ahead and stole Seta from the Sheks, took him all the way back to my base, and we, yeah. Take that, you fucking Ockernite dog. So, that was it. The first chapter of the Holy Nation takedown. And the next episode, we'll be going over what I continue to do against the Holy Nation, and I will probably end this series when I defeat Holy Lord Phoenix. Fuck him. And then after that, maybe I'll make more Kenshi videos. I don't know. But thank you guys all so much for watching. I've been playing so much Kenshi. I'm literally fucking addicted to this game. Please help. Please send help. And I'll see you guys all in the next video. Love you. Bye.